So you might be one of a million people who have their entire social media feed dominated by self-help tips and self-improvement tips. And it's really important to understand when that is just a destructive loop that is hurting you and wasting your time, and when it's something that you should actually be using. So I'm going to talk about why self-help becomes a problem and how it's a problem, what the kind of alternative is to that, like if you're burning out on self-help, what the fuck should you do? And then move between those two things and understanding when self-help is okay and when it's not okay. Because, as we get more into this, like everybody now has a device in their fucking pocket where they can Google the problem they have and hopefully find a solution based on things that are promoted to be the best solution or the number one way to crush this issue or how to not be whatever. As that becomes more and more common, it's going to be more and more likely that people are just getting these destructive fucking loops with all of this media that tells them that they're going to help them, and it's not helping them at all. You should know how to navigate this. So I'm going to talk about how. So why is self-help a problem? Well, it's a problem because it has two really big incentives for you to believe that it's not a problem. One, it's free. Two, it's private. This is really big. A lot of people do not want to drag other people into their shit. A lot of people really kind of fetishize this idea of being self-sufficient. A lot of people just are embarrassed about talking about problems or involving other people, or think that they're not allowed to ask other people because they're devaluing themselves. And the fact that it's free. And what I mean by free is that it doesn't cost money, but it does cost you time. And a lot of people who are motivated to think that self-help is the thing that'll help them get through everything really undervalue their time to justify not spending money. So those are two big incentives for it to kind of be the solution that you want to work. Another, what I'm not going to call incentive, but belief that really contributes to this is the idea that you should be able to solve it on your own. And that can come from just thinking that morally, but it can also come from the sunk cost aspect of it, right? If you've spent a month researching shit and you're still not improving, it feels like a failure to admit that you need to reach out and get help from somebody else at this point. So that's another big part of it, is the idea that you should be able to solve it on your own because you've come this far, or because it's just, you have some belief, idealistically or morally, whatever you want to call it, about you should be able to solve it. Another problem with self-help is that it gears towards the broadest solution, even if the broad solution isn't even applicable to most people. So a lot of people get to this point where they have this issue and they Google a bunch of shit on how to deal with it and none of it works. And they go, it works for everybody else, but not me. So I'm broken. That's a really common conclusion that comes out of failing to adhere to the self-help advice that you look up, is you wonder, why does all of this apparently scientifically backed? You look in the comments, everybody else is talking about how this has changed their life and it's not working for you. That can lead to some really bad fucking beliefs if you go too far with it. If self-help doesn't work, then the logical sort of alternative is social help works. Does social help work? Is it something that you can avoid? Is it something that is just, is it a stylistic thing? Is it just, well, I like to work on my own versus I like working with other people? No, social help is really unique and really fucking beneficial, and you should probably understand why that is. Most skills are learned socially. In school, we learn math and we learn science. And I'm not saying that these are not important to learn, but they are vastly, vastly fucking less valuable than knowing how to socialize, or knowing how to perform basic self-control, or having basic moral guidelines, right? These are skills that are way more fucking important than anything that is taught to you in school, right? The one single system that we all have to go through together. So you're learning not only lots of things socially, you're learning typically the most important stuff socially. Most of the things in your life that matter are being learned in the passive social environments. And this is just kind of how human beings have evolved. So the example that I always use is fish have evolved gills because they expect to be living in the water. Humans evolved to solve things externally because they expect to be around other people. It's kind of the way that we're wired in a lot of ways. We get a lot out of these social interactions. And I think maybe this isn't the greatest way to grasp the deep underlying psychology of it, but I think a useful way to think about it is the idea that the skills that you build socially are kind of like pillars or retaining walls, and more private conceptual information, like from textbooks or self-help or physical tinkering, those are the kind of skills that are really the concrete that pours it in the middle. So if you don't have these fundamental retaining walls around the things that you're trying to improve at, you're just pouring concrete onto a flat piece of land, right? It's not really going to help you. The externalization aspect of how we learn is so fucking important. It's so hard to stress, honestly. I'm going to start with kind of a smaller example that I think it kind of resonates with a lot of people. So if you're trying to figure something out, right, you're trying to decide between if you want to do something or not, is silently, privately in your room, you kind of just sit there and have this weird silent relationship between going, I should, or I don't want to, right? But if a friend asks you if you want to do something, you typically do something like this. You might go, do I want to? Well, I don't know. I'm thinking about it. I'm not sure. You cut yourself off and you repeat things redundantly and you ask yourself questions out loud. That externalization process is something that happens because it's social, and it's something that doesn't happen when you're learning shit privately. Like, this is the benefit of doing things socially. It's just a million little different things like this that really help you see the problem. And it also gives you the biggest benefit, which is that you're not in your own head anymore. You're working with somebody else who can catch your blind spots, right? If you think about yourself as somebody that's driving a truck, right? It doesn't matter how good you are at driving the truck. There are blind spots in the cabin. And this is why it's useful to work with other people. It's so fucking useful to get out of your own head. There are also, I'm going to give one more example of kind of a social trigger when you're working through ideas, is the honesty that you have when you're all of a sudden asked to qualify an idea to person. So this is something that you might have learned in some other class or just online or in life or whatever. Is just the idea that if you really understand something, try to explain it to somebody else. And if you can't, it shows you that you don't understand it, right? So these skills all really add up and make just any form of social externalized, like real learning and thought exploration with another person so fucking valuable. And in a lot of ways, it kind of builds the framework of what you can use self-help or private learning towards. So that doesn't necessarily help you. Like I'll talk about how you can navigate self-help in a second, but I think it's good to give you that little bit of information that makes you emotionally click with the importance of getting support socially, because there's so many people that treat it as a quirk while their fucking life is imploding around them, right? You sit there and you go, I shouldn't need other people's house. I just like to do things on my own. Okay. But that can't come at the cost of your entire fucking life being destroyed, right? It's really important to understand that social help is this thing that you are motivated to avoid, because if you weren't motivated to avoid it, you would see all of those incentives to do everything with someone else around you. So when is self-help okay? Self-help is good to use when you're expanding or improving skills that you already have. So if you're already invested in something, if you're learning how to invest, or if you're learning how to, code, or learning how to paint, whatever, and you're motivated and you have those skills and you want to expand off them, self-help's great. It builds onto that foundation that you have. It's something that you can use immediately. It slots in to things that you're already doing. If it's something that you immediately engage with and connect with and respond to emotionally as well, go for it. Even if it's something that's kind of deep, right? So if you're because I work with people with ADHD a lot, so a really good example of this is a lot of people have huge breakthroughs by just kind of watching a video that lets them click with what ADHD actually is. So if you have these strong emotional reactions to it and it engages you a lot, keep going with it. That's fine. Something specific that you're looking up is also a generally good guideline. If you have a problem and you're looking up solutions, or if you're going, why is it this way? Or if you're just scrolling through shit because you're trying to figure out if that's you're looking for both the question and the answer to be proposed to at the same time, don't do that. It should be things that you're kind of specifically looking up. Like that's generally another good guideline for it, I think. So conversely, when you shouldn't be doing it is when it is not specific, when there are big changes in character, right? If you don't like who you are, or you're trying to change a really big idea like your competence level, or your identity, or your overall relationship with your life, or your outlook, these are really big changes. Do not self-help them. If you're trying to fill in ideas that are that big, these retaining walls are so far apart, and we're back to that idea of just pouring concrete onto a flat lot. It's not going to work for you. If it's extremely difficult as well, it's kind of an idea that, we talk about the extreme width of certain ideas like competence or self-esteem. But even if it's a narrow idea, if it's really, really, really difficult, probably the same issue of the walls are too far apart. Don't slam your fucking head against things that you're just not making progress on. Look at that as an opportunity to kind of seek out a more, personal, social form of support. Don't be motivated by keeping secrets, and don't be motivated by not spending money. Again, the amount of people that are hesitating so intensely to spend like $100 or 120, whatever therapy costs these days, like money on a therapy session, because they think that they can solve it on their own, and they just end up spending 3 weeks trying to Google the issue and work through it themselves. Like, is $120 really worth 3 weeks of your life? Like, really think about what your relationship is with money and with time, because a lot of the time the embarrassment is kind of built into this, or the shame is kind of built into it, right? If you really put these two things side by side, it's pretty obvious which one is more valuable. And a lot of people convince themselves that they can't spend money because they're ashamed about making one more bad mistake, or they can't afford to make any more wrong decisions at this point, or waste money at this point. Make sure that you are understanding the way that your feelings and your beliefs about yourself are impacting the value you have towards time and money. So self-help seems like it's harmless content, but it can really quickly become a trap. It can really become a form of kind of entertainment media. It can become a form of avoidance and kind of shame, where you just spend all this fucking time thinking about trying to improve yourself without actually making any progress, and it just feels good to be in the online space of, oh, I'm working on myself. Watch out for that trap, even if it can help you a lot of the time. I have nothing against the idea conceptually, but I do think that there's a big problem in how people use it. Stop and ask yourself when you've actually benefited from self-help, right? It kind of relates to what I was talking about earlier about how do you know when you're just spending lots of time invested in the space because it makes you feel good, or it aligns with what you wish was true about yourself, and it's kind of like shameful in nature. Stop and really think about, how much have I fucking benefited from the past 2 years of constantly clicking on shorts that give me like productivity tips? It's always worth overcoming the discomfort of working with other people, because the discomfort of working with other people is such a strong fucking motivator on why people think that they should be doing it, why people think that they can't afford to spend money, all of this stuff. So really audit your relationship with discomfort or your embarrassment about reaching out with help, and understand how much that's impacting your relationship with self-help stuff, so that you don't fall into these traps that I've been talking about. Make sure that you help me out by supporting me with likes and subscribes, and this is my website and all of that shit that you have to say at the end of videos now these days. So thanks for watching.